do a photo. Christopher, you stand right here. So right here, we're gonna do a photo. If you guys will go ahead and turn on your lights. And we're gonna do this photo right here real quickly. Oh, you wanna turn around? Yep. Here we go, guys. On the count of 3. Oh, that's a great looking audience. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Take the photo. We're gonna do one more real quickly. Count of 3. 1, 2. Oh, there we go. Okay, we're gonna move the chairs in. Everybody, Christopher!
Oh, you're being so nice.
Oh.
Welcome, everyone. How are you? Oh, I think you guys can do better. How are you? That's the Utah I know. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. It's great to be here. What a wonderful crowd. Thank you for that warm welcome.
He was backstage just in awe at how energetic you guys were and how many people were here. So, you know, we love the hospitality in Utah. We're so happy to have you.
I'm thrilled to be here. I've been here a couple of times. This is my first time to the convention. And but the couple of times that I've been to Salt Lake City, everybody's been wonderful. It's been a wonderful experience.
Okay, so we're going to dive right into it.
Okay.
A lot of people think that when you're a voice actor, you just go from saying, I think I want to be a voice actor, straight to Spider-Man. Can you tell us a little bit about your voice acting journey?
Sure. Well, I was originally born in Maine. That's where I'm from, and I moved to New York when I was about 8, and I got into the business when there at a very young age. And voiceover work sort of came naturally at a very young age for whatever reason, commercial and voiceover work. But I moved out to Los Angeles for a television series that I did called Starman in 1986. Yeah, right. And then I followed that up with a show called Day by Day, which was a lot of fun. And then it must have been a few years later, I got the audition for Spiderman. And that was incredible because I was a huge Spider-Man fan. I loved the comic, loved Marvel in general. And so to get that audition was sort of like, wait, you want me to voice, this hero that I've grown up with? And so I took the audition very seriously. And I think that was conveyed in the audition, because when I was in the audition, I was closing my eyes and I was imagining the dialogue, the comics that I had read growing up as a child. So I would be imagining, what would he be doing in this scene? And what's his body posture here? And so I was sort of acting it out in the booth. And I think that sort of came across because I was a true believer, and I loved the character. So I was very fortunate and blessed to be able to voice that character for the time on Fox.
So what do you do the night before you audition for Spider-Man? Like, are you reading comics? Are you in your Spidey PJs? Like, what's going on?
All of the above. Yeah, actually I had collected comics as a kid for many years. So I had this huge comic collection. So before the audition, I actually went out and purchased, they have those booklets, sort of like these hardback reproductions. And I just went through the entire, for dozens and dozens of comics. And I just did the research. And I'd grown up with the character. I loved the character. Spider-Man is sort of the quintessential coming-of-age hero. He's the one that's always in conflict. Prior to that, you sort of had these perfect, Cold Warrior icons, like Captain America, Superman. They were perfect and they were pure, and they were, and Spider-Man was, as a kid, he was flawed and it was awkward. And so that mythic archetype really sort of course, appealed to me as a young man. And,
who did you call first when you found out you got Spider-Man?
I think I called my brother first. And I was like, dude, you're not gonna believe I Spider-Man, So, yeah, it was just a great time.
So most of us know you from your voiceover work, but you've done some pretty cool things in television. And like, what is it that brought you to television, and what did you love about television that you don't get out of voice work?
Well, I started, I was doing both at the time. And the series that I came out to do with Starman in '86 led to a sitcom, which is very different. Single camera is very different than multi-camera. And I loved it. I just loved everything about it. But voiceover is interesting because especially like with Spider-Man, we did it like an old radio show. So it's very different. When you're doing single camera work, a film or a sitcom, there's a different level of interaction. When you're doing voiceover work, and again, the way we did it was like an old radio show from the 30s, with all the booths lined up. And we had all these wonderful iconic actors on the show too, which was incredible. It's a very different experience. It's a very internal experience. And especially with something like, you're just standing there with a piece of paper in front of you, and all these heroic, incredible things are taking place. So you sort of got to put yourself in that, in that space. There's this funny. I tell this story all the time. When I would do the role, the camera guy, the sound guy would come in, and they have the booth, the mic. They put the mic up, and you get your script. And I would start recording, and then they would say, "Well, hold on a second, Chris, you're off mic." And so the engineer would come back in, and he'd check, and he'd adjust the mic, and it was fine. And we went through this. This is when we first started doing the series, and this went on for 15, 20 minutes, and they couldn't figure out why I kept going off mic. And suddenly, one of the producers, John Semper, the producer, realized that when I was doing Peter Parker, I would do this, or the mic was here, and when I would do Spiderman, I was down here, so I was totally off mic, and then I'd be Peter Parker, and then I'd be Spiderman, and then I'd be Peter Parker. So we did this one little dance, and somebody finally realized that. So the engineer would subsequently come in and go, "Okay, Peter stance, Spidey stance, Peter stance," and they would adjust.
So, Spider-Man to Disney princess movie.
That's right.
You're Prince Eric forever and ever and ever.
I'm thrilled to be so.
So what was that like when Marvel's a big deal, but at the time, there wasn't the big Marvel movies that we have right now. It was big Disney animations. And you had you had all these big movies that were coming out, animated films, and you go to audition for Eric, and then you get it.
Well, that's the interesting thing about it. Okay, so I was 15 at the time when I did Prince Eric. Most people don't realize that it was 1988, 80...
Just a couple years ago. It's
just
fine.
A few years ago.
Just a few years ago.
When we did it, and then the movie came out in 89, 90. So I was 15, I was doing that television series day by day. But back then, Disney was in a different place.
We call it the black era, the dark times.
It was like a lull, right? It was like Rescuers, and then there was the Great Mouse.
Still love it, but
which
it was,
I love. Rescuers.
The dark
Great
ages
Mouse
of
Detective is
Disney.
one of my favorites. Right? Yeah, I love Great Mouse Detective. Oh, now Bartholomew, I'm afraid you've caught and upset me. When someone upsets me. Anyway, so I was a huge fan. Obviously, but they called me for that, and I was like, Disney. I'm like, okay, so I went in. No, someone like me, I could never get a job like that, because after that, Little Mermaid made like $1 bazillion, right? So then all of a sudden it was all the celebrities were on board. I couldn't get a job like that now. So it was fascinating and really, really incredible that I was able to have that opportunity to be able to be part of the Disney legacy as really sort of nobody, and that's okay. But at the time, being a teenager and an actor, and just this incredible opportunity, and to be associated with all of the talent of that film. Because as Prince Eric, I I did my part, but movie's not really about Prince Eric. The movie's about the incredible, immense talent of the writers and the songwriters and Jodie, and everybody was so talented in that film. So for me to be a part of it in any way is just a remarkable thing to be part of the legacy. So I'm thrilled.
What's your favorite voice that you've ever done? Because you do a ton of voices, and you're still in the Disney family doing a lot of Disney voices. So what are your favorite voices that you do it and it makes you smile like that was good?
I probably because I grew up with Spider-Man. Spider-Man's probably my favorite. It just means the most to me, I think. Just as growing up with that I love mythology. I'm still a huge fan of mythology, and Joseph Campbell and all that stuff. And so to be a part of that Marvel universe, I think probably, I sort of look back and say, oh man, funny thing, people will come up to me and they'll tell me how much they enjoyed The Little Mermaid and how much joy that brought to their lives. And that makes me feel great. I had a guy come up to me at one of these panels not too long ago, and he said, your Spider-Man helped me get through being bullied as a kid in school. And I just thought, if that doesn't bring things into perspective, like value to your work as an actor, you think, well, what are we really doing up here? Well, we're playing make-believe. Somebody says something like that to you, that really means something. So that I thought that was incredible. So that sort of heroic archetype, because a lot of people don't read Bullfinch's Mythology anymore, and the Iliad and the Odyssey and the Aeneid and all that. We read Marvel comics and we watch Disney films, and that's our mythology. So to be part of that's a huge honor to me.
Do we have any questions?
Hi, Christopher. I'm a dentist, but you have my ideal job. I'd love to do voiceover someday. So I was going to ask you, first of all, like, what would you suggest to get into the field?
Well, I think the best way, I mean, nowadays, it's very different than when I was doing it. Because, you know, nowadays I would have no clue about how to do this. But I think that doing workshops, finding legit workshops, because there are a lot of scams out there. You know, it's like, oh, we'll get you in this business for free. Just sign on the dotted line and pay us $1 million. And, you know, it's all a scam. But if you find the legit place where you can go do a workshop and then learn the craft, and then have your work exposed to legitimate agents at some of these fairs and things that they have, that's really the best way. So do your research, find a reputable place, go in, do a workshop, learn the craft, and then get some exposure to some legitimate agents, and that will be your journey. But the most important thing is just do what you love. You know, follow your bliss, as Joseph Campbell says. You know, it's just, if you love it and you love the work, do that. You find the voices that are inside you, you know, and let those come to life. Read a character and sort of, you know, mull it about and just enjoy it. Enjoy the process.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
What's your favorite scene on Spider-Man?
My favorite scene on Spider-Man? Geez, I don't know. I think the Mary Jane and the, you know, Hobgoblin stuff is the most iconic with, you know, or Shocker rather. The scene with Shocker where Mary Jane, that whole sequence, I think that's probably the most iconic and most emotional. I think also I really enjoyed the multiverse stuff, which John Semper sort of pioneered. Because I think I've played, I should be in the Guinness Book of World Records. I've played more Spider-Man than I think anybody on the planet. I mean, I played like 12 in that, you know, those 2 episodes. There were like 13 different Spider-Men from different dimensions. I've played on other shows. I've played, you know, Spider Knight and Wolf Spider, and I've played Shocker. I've played Electro. I've played all kinds of characters in the last series, Ultimate Spider-Man, with Drake, and that was a blast. So I think probably that scene, Shocker and Mary Jane, is probably the most iconic. But I've played a lot of Spider-Man. I love it.
Hello, Chris. Thanks for coming to Salt Lake.
Thanks for having me.
And so, first of all, are you familiar with the original telling of The Little Mermaid from Hans Christian Andersen? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, the basics, sure.
Okay, so then how do you like Disney's reimagining storytelling of The Little Mermaid compared to Hans Christian Andersen? That's been kind of depressing. She dies at the end, sure. And then Disney reimagining the story.
It's an interesting question. I think it depends on sort of the. Don't mind me if I deep dive into mythology and archetypes and all that. It's just the way my brain works. Maybe I overthink this stuff, but I don't know. There's a reason why it appeals to billions of people across the world, right? It's not just because it's pretty lights and there's some fun songs. I guess it depends on, to answer your question, the sort of the mythic archetype you want to convey, the story that you want to tell. So they've reimagined it, obviously, but the message was very different. I think that the message was very empowering to young girls, and I know there's been some criticism, sort of in the modern era, about that you know she you know gives up her voice and you know gives up her identity to chase the boy because she needs the man, and there's been sort of some backlash from that. But actually, if you think about it, who counsels her to do all those things? The Sea Witch. It's the Sea Witch who tells her you don't need a voice, you can just be a pretty face, right? And the prince can't recognize her because of the advice of the Sea Witch. So the malevolent archetype, the malevolent figure is the one that tells the girl, no, you don't have a voice. You're not empowered. You're just a pretty face. But when you do that, when you give in to that voice, the prince can't recognize you because he actually sees the empowered, beautiful you. So I think that's a very important archetypal message to convey to young women, especially growing up in Hollywood, where I saw a lot of sea witches and a lot of Little Mermaids. So that's important. That'll go viral. Somebody's going to post that somewhere.
Well, hi cousin. My name is Richard David Barnes. Just not from Sandy, England, the relatives. I don't know if we're related way distant back, but it's great to see a fellow, you know, you're becoming a prince with Disney. how did you prepare yourself to study for Prince Eric to do the role? And your other ones, really like your Prince Charming and the Cinderella sequel movies too. And what others? And you did the cartoon series as well. I like the environmental messages in that one. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's interesting. With Spider-Man, I had a lot of material to work with as the character, sort of the coming-of-age hero archetype and all of that, and that was very interesting. With Little Mermaid, not so much. It wasn't a known character, really, to me. But I think that because I was so young, and I was 15, this was before I did Spider-Man, of course, there was so much of the character was just inherent to me. He's sort of the young, cocky, prince who's, he's got it all figured out. And so that youth and vitality and confidence it was, I think, so much sort of naturally part of my personality. What does it say? Innocence, gives me confidence to face reality, or something like that. So I think there was a lot of that in the character, and a lot of that in me. So in terms of preparation for that, I just sort of looked in the mirror and said, I got this Little Mermaid thing. Yeah, I can be a prince. And other characters, it's funny, when they asked me to do some of the Spider-Man work later on, like in Shattered Dimensions, Spider-Man Noir, or Edge of Time, they came to me and they said, well, we'd like you to be part of these video games. And I said, well, gee, I'm an old guy now. Like, I'm Spider-Man. How am I going to play Spider-Man? He's a young, coming-of-age hero. And they said, well, yeah, but these other Spider-Men from other dimensions, it's different. They're sort of, older and they're darker and a little more misanthropic. And I said, oh, they're me. I said, okay, I can do that. and so that was an interesting thing. And then, of course, to play in as you mentioned, some of the other series that I've done, Ultimate Spider-Man, for instance, to play the villain, which is also fun because, as the old thing goes, die the hero or live long enough to become the villain. So then, of course, to be able to play some of these, famous, like Electro. There's a great, funny story I like to tell. I'm in the booth on Ultimate Spider-Man with Drake Bell, and we're in the booth, and there's, the whole cast is there, and we're doing this, we're doing the scene. And Electro is giving this monologue. He's monologuing about taking over the world, and he's flying into this fit of rage. And it was a whole paragraph of just rambling villain monologue. And so I'm foaming at the mouth, and doing this whole thing. And I finish the take, and I'm kind of catching my breath. And I open my eyes, and I see one of the other actors lean out from behind his stand, and he goes, "Everything okay at home, man?" And I thought, oh, I nailed it. That means I nailed it. So funny stuff like that. So you prepare just by, taking all these things into consideration. Yes, Superman.
So, are you able to use some of your voices for 2 sentences? All of some of your different voices that you've played?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Am I able to?
Do you want him to say a few of his voices in a couple sentences?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, from Little Mermaid, I think one of my favorite lines is, this is the one I got my wife with, by the way. I know she's out there somewhere, Grims. I just haven't found her yet. That's a famous Prince Eric. All right.
What is your favorite part of doing an Ariel? Eric.
In Little Mermaid?
Yeah.
Okay. My favorite part of doing the Little Mermaid? Well, I think at the time it was the fun of playing a prince, which was great. And also, this is one of the first occasions, by the way, most people don't realize this. I walked into the booth, I was 15. This is 87 about. And back in those days, when you recorded something, you didn't record it like this. You recorded it like this. Okay, these big camcorders. And they had a tripod set up. And I remember thinking, well, why is a camera there? And they said to me, oh, well, we're going to actually videotape you doing the role because the animator is going to look at that and incorporate some of your expressions into the character. And I was just like, what? Like, that's new and crazy. Now that's just par for the course. But back then it wasn't. This was all very new. And so that was a very exciting thing to experience, to be part of this new wave of Disney animation was incredible. And of course, at the time I thought it was fun, but now, as a much older man, looking back at that, I can appreciate it in a different way. To think, wow, I'm part of that legacy. What an honor. What a remarkable thing to be to be associated with, especially when I'm not the great talent involved in it. I'm just associated with them, but that's fine with me because there were some truly remarkable people in that film.
Did you have a favorite line or scene from The Little Mermaid?
I think, geez, I love the kiss the girl sequence so much. It's beautiful. I think probably Part of Your World is probably the most iconic moment. That scene where she's sort of spiraling up and the hair is, it's sort of the youth
You
journey.
wanted that hair, didn't you? You were jealous. I think your hair could do that. I think we could get it to do that.
I've got my pirate thing going on now. But it just sort of it was so iconic of the youth yearning to be in a different world, because that's so much about what being young is. It's all about, I don't want to be in my world, my little sheltered world. I want to be out there in the strange, in the foreign, in the forbidden. And that's a lot of the journey of youth is surviving that. And again, growing up in Hollywood, let me tell you, there's a lot to that.
Hi, so as a child of the 70s and early 80s, I grew up on the Brady Bunch.
Okay.
And I loved your performances, Greg Brady. You were amazing. I would say maybe even better than the original. But the performances, But the performances in that movie were so spot on, and the movie and its sequel. How do you prepare to play such an iconic character as Greg Brady?
That was a lot of watching videos. I mean, I just watched the show over and over again. Actually, Gary Cole, who played the father, Mike Brady, he had it on a loop in his dressing room. So it was everywhere. It was all around us. And so I just watched over and over again, and just video and rewind, and I would watch his expressions, and then I would watch how he walked. And because it was an affectionate satire, the thing about the Brady Bunch films is we weren't mocking them. I mean, we were making fun of them, but it was an affectionate satire. We loved them while we were making fun of them. And so I realized that to do that, I needed to exaggerate everything about him. So I watched everything that Barry Williams did, and then I thought, okay, now how do I exaggerate that a little to make it silly and fun and different? And then I basically just copied really just more talented actors than I am. So I would look at him, and then I would add a little Jim Carrey to the walk, and a little bit, right? And then I would do these little things, and I would say, okay, I'm going to do a little of this, and a little Barney Fife over here. And then, it kind of worked out that way. So it was exaggerating the natural characteristics of Greg, again, just sort of, so that we were all laughing together. And it was like 185 degrees in that car, by the way. It was like 150 degrees when we were filming. Of course, this is the carjacking scene, but it was because you have to have lights mounted on the car. It was like 145 degrees in the car because there's no air. So we had to have everything. It was 115 outside. We had full polyester, outfits with makeup, right? So they'd say, okay, we're getting ready, and then they'd open the doors, and we'd get in the car real quick, and then, okay, Chris, roll up the window. I'm like, I don't want to roll up the window. It's 145 degrees. You'd roll up the window really quick, and I would roll it up, and just as I finished, go, action. And then, it's just a normal day. We'd roll the window down, We were just sweating. It was crazy. It was unbelievable. Yeah.
I just want to say it's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
I see Prince Eric when I look at you and your mannerisms.
Well, that's the magic of Disney with that video camera.
My question is this. In the recent reimagining of Beauty and the Beast has his own solo within the live action. If you could write a solo for Prince Eric, what do you think it would be about?
Wow, that's a really great question.
Thank you.
See, I told you backstage, singing.
Honestly, I think if Prince Eric sang a song, I think it would be about longing. I think this is a young man who is, he's a prince. He's not the king yet, so to speak, but he's new to his power. He's new to his kingdom. There's that little reference to the Princess of Glowerhaven, right? He's young and he wants love and he's in conflict. There's a lot of his character is about longing for her, but he doesn't know it's her, right? Because she's been seduced to diminish herself, but so he feels conflicted, right? And that's why I say never. One of the principal messages of The Little Mermaid is never let someone seduce you into diminishing yourself, especially as a woman. cannot emphasize that enough, especially growing up in Hollywood. You know, don't fall for the Ursulas. They're all jealous and bitter of the beauty and strength in you. So I think his song would be about longing and conflict, because he loves her, but he's confused. So I think that's what his song would be about.
Hi.
Hello.
What superhero would you be and why?
What superhero would I be and why? You mean like in real life? Well, I don't think I could be, I don't know if I could be Spiderman anymore. I'm a little old, a little long in the tooth for Spiderman. I think I'd probably be Doctor Strange now. I got the gray.
And he has a cape.
Love that character.
What do you think about, so there was a new Spider-Man movie that came out, Homecoming.
I loved it.
And
he did a great job.
Don't you think, for me, that Spider-Man on Tom Holland really kind of showed, like, if somebody was told, like you were younger, and said, you're Spider-Man, you're a part of, you know, this big crew of superheroes, you'd be like, yes! And you'd be totally dorky about it. I think they really captured, I think, what I saw in the old comics of the dorky Spider-Man that kind of was clumsy, but also really excited to be an Avenger. Yeah. And I really feel like, I mean, do you feel like your character that you're really a part of Spider-Man now, you know, and he's a part of you. Do you feel like they portrayed this character you've been building?
Yeah, I thought that Holland did the best portrayal of Spider-Man I've seen.
Thank you. I just won a bet.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I loved his performance. I loved everything about it.
Hi.
Hi.
I was just wondering if you were a fan of the Brady Bunch before you were involved in it and how you got involved in the project.
Yeah, I was a fan. In reruns, of course. I'm not that old. I got involved in it just simply by auditioning. And I auditioned like 8 times or something. I had to keep going back. It was a brutal auditioning process. It was really long and intense. But I was a fan, and I'll never forget when we were all gathered on the stage for the first time. I can't express to you the surreal feeling of walking onto the set, turning and seeing the Brady house. It was the most bizarre, because you know, you grew up on this, watching this, and there it was. I mean, everything about it was right there. And you know, we kind of looked at each other and thought, okay, so it was like tiptoeing onto, you know, hallowed ground. You know, sort of, okay, wait, no, now we've got to perform and you know, be professional. But it was very surreal experience having been a fan and seeing that set for the first time with the horse and everything. It was crazy. Anyway.
Hi, I love the Brady movies. I was wondering if you have any fun memories or stories you'd be willing to share with like the other castmates, or pranks, anything like that.
Let's see. There was a great moment. Actually, it was in the first. They kind of touched on this a little, sort of silly naughtiness in the second one. But there was a scene. Christine and I, who was, you know, was very, very funny. There was a scene where we're looking for Jan in the first film. And we're driving around the valley. It's very late at night. We've been up for like 18 hours shooting. We're all exhausted. But we're doing this scene where we're looking for Jan. And we were hoping it would make the outtakes. We didn't tell anybody either. We were doing the scene, and they're looking for her, and we're, you know, they're saying, okay, you know, guys, we need you in frame. Like, okay, so we're, you know, we need to get closer. So, okay, so we're, you know, trying to get closer. We're in frame. And of course, as soon as the scene was over, we just started to pretend making out. It was the funniest thing. They didn't put it in their gag or whatever. I think it was too much. But it was a great moment between Christine and I. We were laughing about it. There's another scene where we were getting off the off-ramp, or the freeway off-ramp was right where we were filming. But we had to set the car so we would go around a corner and then there was a little scene where we were passing another car, and then we'd have to reset, so we'd have to drive all the way around to reset. Well, you know, the camera crew and everybody's over here, and we'd have to go around the block, and over about here is where the freeway off-ramp was. So to the people coming off the freeway, they were like, what the hell? It was just people in the 70s get up, and of course I had to drive really slowly, and I was irritating people, so it was sort of like, the story became real as we were annoying people at the freeway off ramp, and they were just like, who are these bizarre people dressed in costumes in this 70s car? It was very funny. That was another very funny moment of the film.
Hey there, Chris.
Hi.
Hey, so I grew up with the 1990s Spider-Man TV show, and I absolutely loved it. And I have a question for you. When's it going to be released to DVD and Blu-ray? Because I can't find it anywhere.
I keep seeing some people, I think it was released in some countries and not in other countries, and people will bring it up to me and I'll see it, and I don't know if some of them were bootlegged in the past, but now there's a new one. They seem to be around, and I'm not sure because I want it too. I'd like to get the whole set too. But somebody actually today brought one up, and apparently it's available on, she said it was available on Amazon. So I'm gonna go check Amazon and see if I can find it. So I don't know.
As soon as you get it, tweet it so that we all
There you
know.
go.
Because we're all following him on Twitter, right?
My Twitter handle actually is funny. It's at Eric Spider Brady. I figured, the three things I'm known for, Eric Spider Brady. Anyway.
Okay, so out of all of the voices that you've seen now come after The Little Mermaid and all of these, characters, is there one that you were like, oh, I wish I could have done that one? Was there, one of the Disney animated films that came after you?
Oh man.
Because I know a lot of people wanted to be involved in Little Mermaid. I've seen a lot of videos of,
Sure.
Now you said a lot of big actors are in, these films, and they're like, oh, I loved Little Mermaid, and that's like what really got me in. So now you've got these movies that came after you, or maybe before. You said you liked, a ton of the Rescuers movies and stuff. Is there a voice that you just wish, like, I wish I could have done that one?
I don't know. I'd like to play a Disney villain. I'd like to play a Disney villain now.
I think that would be fun.
I think I have the chops. I think I have the voice for it. I can. I don't know if I could sing enough, but that'd be wonderful to play a villain.
I don't know. I guess the villains kind of have songs, right? But they can kind of talk their songs, so I think you could
There we go.
probably get through that. What's coming up next for you? What are the things that you're working on right now? And what are some things that you, like your goals, like you really want to get into?
Well, let's
You've
see.
kind of done everything.
Well, thank you. It's very sweet of you to say. One of the projects that I'm hoping gets off the ground is John Semper, who was the producer of Spiderman, the animated series, is talking about getting a show called War of the Rocket Men, which is kind of a throwback to the serials of the 1930s, of the Rocketeer type stuff. But it's very interesting because there's a lot of, I think, relevance to what's going on in the world today, without getting into too much detail about fighting fascism and about the rise of authoritarianism around the world. I think that story, not only would it just be awesome to cosplay, because having that sort of 1930s Rocketman type stuff would be great, but I think it's also very politically and socially relevant. We need to periodically remind ourselves why we are who we are, and why we're great, and why what we have done is great. I think it's too easy to forget why America's great.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
That's how comic books came about.
I think it's important to remind ourselves and the world about what makes our nation great is our values. And I think that we express those values very well in mythology and our modern mythology. And so I would like to be part of a project that says, here we are, here's what we stand for, and we stand up against authoritarianism and totalitarianism in all its forms everywhere, foreign and domestic. And those are the values for which we fight. So that'd be nice to be a part of something like that.
Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Okay. If Marvel Studios called you for like a cameo role in Spider-Man Homecoming, like the second one,
yes.
It doesn't have to be a cameo, but like, what character or like person would you like be? Like, who would you think?
In the Marvel universe?
Yeah.
I think it'd be great to play like some evil interdimensional Doctor Strange villain. I could do a voiceover for that, you know, I mean, that'd be a lot of fun. Or some CGI thing, some sort of like, I could, you know, call Andy Serkis and be like, dude, you're the master of this, like, show me how to do it. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Can you call Andy Serkis?
No, you know, these are hypothetical, you know,
Okay.
ramblings of my imagined desires. But I mean, something like that. Wouldn't that be awesome to do something like that? I'd love to play some sort of Marvel villain, some sort of, you know, alternate dimension Marvel villain. I think that'd be thrilling.
Hi. I was wondering, could you talk like Spider-Man for me?
Well, what would you like me to say, Mary Jane? Go hug a rope, Hobby.
What would you say, and I know someone asked this earlier about voice acting, what do you think is most important to remember as a voice actor? So I'm kind of like, I work in radio, so we're like the redheaded stepchild of voice acting. But it's something that you have to practice. And so are there things that you do practicing? Are there things that you don't do to your voice to make sure, I mean, it's your instrument, it's what you do for a living. Are there certain things that you do that you would kind of give hints to others?
I guess it depends on the kind of work you do. Commercial work is very different than animation, and I've done much more animation than I've done commercial work. So it's a different beast. You know, like the character who voices like the car commercial is different than, you know, an animated character. It's different. I tend to be more the animated guy. And so the advice is live in your imagination. Live in your imagination. There's that wonderful quote from, I believe it was Jung. He said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. So go deep in there. You know, find those characters, really, you know, delve into your soul and your psyche, and live in your imagination. And the magic sort of comes from that wellspring of self-reflection. That might be sort of overthinking it, but that's just been my experience. It's not just about making funny voices. It's about finding personalities and getting in touch with yourself for bringing characters to life. That's the way I see it.
Who do you think should play Eric in the live-action Little Mermaid?
Oh, gee, I don't know. That's a great question. I don't have a good answer for that. But I'm open to suggestions. I think I know who should play Grimsby.
I really think you could be King Triton. The beard's
I'm ready.
You've got the long hair.
Are you kidding? I'll start working out now. I'll do like P90X, right? I'll be buffed with my Triton. I would love to. I would love to be a part of that.
So, my name is Ariel.
Nice to meet you.
You actually just kind of answered the question I was going to ask. If you had a chance to do a cameo in the live-action movie, would you do it?
I would play, you know, third soldier from the left as the carriage goes by. I mean, of course, it'd be wonderful. It'd be a blast to be associated with that project in any way. Anything, really. I wouldn't care. That'd be great. Who wouldn't want to be part of it?
Can you give us a couple of, you gave us a couple of voices earlier. Can you give us some of your favorites other than Spider-Man?
Oh man, geez, let's see.
What?
I did one for Sarah. How about? Well, hey there, groovy chick.
I like how you have to use your eyebrow when you say that.
It can't be done otherwise. It doesn't work otherwise. Hey there,
Try it
groovy
without
chick.
it.
Hey there, groovy chick. Hey there, you see it?
What would you say about your whole, you know, you've got your big pond of work, I guess, ocean of work that you have out there that you've done. And you really said that the last thing you wanted to do was do another project that really kind of told people about values and all of these things that you do. Would you say that everything that you've done, that you're really happy with it and you feel like, it kind of set the tone, or is there anything that you were like, I wish I wouldn't have done that? Or are you really proud of everything that you've done?
Well, I think every actor through the course of their career does some work just for a paycheck.
Right.
So I think every actor would look back and say, that was a paycheck. Okay. But there's a difference between doing that and saying, oh, I did this movie that, wasn't very good or whatever, and it was just a paycheck, and, whatever. There's a difference between saying that and saying, God, I did some project that was sort of contrary to my moral compass. That's a whole different thing. And I've never done anything like that. I've always felt like the things I've done have been quality, and they've made people laugh, even if they weren't very good. There's a difference between, well, we tried to do something and it didn't work, it wasn't very good, but at least what we were trying to do was fine, or was noble, or at least was a good effort. I don't feel like I've ever done anything that was sort of contrary to, like, oh God, I did something that was, hurt the world in some way. I don't feel that. I feel like very proud overall of my body of work. Even if I've done some projects that weren't so great, I feel like I've done a lot more projects that were fantastic and had a great impact.
Well, I think we've liked them all.
Thank you.
So outside of acting, voice acting and live action, directing, writing, producing, any of those things?
No, well, actually, I write short stories.
Right.
I'm hesitant to bring it up because the short stories I write tend to be very, very, I almost want to put them under a pseudonym because they're very dark and twisted and disturbing, like I said.
That villain inside of you.
Well, I grew up in Hollywood, right? So I do write very sort of misanthropic, troubling short stories. Kind of goes back to that Jung comment earlier. But you can't take the hero's journey. You can't go on the hero's journey without going into the underworld, mythically. You can't do it. It's not about this like ascent into light and purity. You have to face the shadow. And that's what makes a lot of the myths so important. And I think that's actually why a lot of people relate to the myths. That's one of the reasons that I think that the reboot of Superman was so good, because they sort of humanized him, right? That's why Dark Knight was successful. If you're looking at sort of the distant Olympian perfect figure on the mountain, how can we relate to that person? We can't. But when you see the flawed person who struggles, who has turmoil, and goes through challenges and fate, well, that's the real hero, because you're Frodo on the mountain. You're a normal person going through extraordinary experiences, or you're a terribly flawed person. You're the alcoholic Tony Stark who becomes heroic. And these things are important. These myths are important. So I think that as I've gotten older, I've really appreciated that. And so I write a lot of stories about very flawed, disturbed people that, find sort of redemption. I think that's kind of an important myth in general in life and in mythology and religion. Redemption is kind of a big one.
Hi, Chris.
Hi.
You told us to hold on to our imaginations for individuals who are kind of wanting to go into entertainment. Oftentimes, children and teenagers are told to grow up and let go of those. What would you suggest to them to be able to hold on to that imagination and carry that with them?
Well, comic conventions are great. How do you express that? I would say this, and it's what I do say, which is emphasize the importance of myth, of mythology. Again, sort of Joseph Campbell, Robert Bly type stuff in some ways. Emphasize the importance of the mythic world and the imagination, because these stories that we tell, why is Marvel and Disney a multi-billion-dollar franchise? Again, it's not just because there are some colorful songs that we're nodding our heads to. It's because there are perennial themes to the human condition that address fundamental needs in us, which in a lot of ways today, particularly in Western society, a lot of our previous coping mechanisms don't work. Like I said, a lot of people don't, read Aeschylus or, Virgil or Homer. A lot of people don't read the Bible or whatever it is. So these myths fill this kind of void within us. So I would say to keep the imagination of youth alive, I would say express to them the importance of those stories, of those myths, of the make-believe. Because make-believe is really about inner belief. It's about getting in touch with what's going on in yourself and in the human species. It connects us. The myths connect us. And I think that's so important, which is why Marvel and Disney are worldwide franchises of success.
We have about 1 minute, so if you can be super quick and get your question in.
So I was a fan of Starman, and it was only one season, and it was canceled, unfortunately. We watched it every week as it came on. So in the end, the son and the father, of course, left, and they said, someday we'll find the mother. I was just curious, what do you think would have happened if a second season had gone on? Do you think they would have found her again?
Yeah, they would have. Well, they did find her at the end. I think they would have they would have explored the story about that developing relationship, and then the story would have, I think, eventually gone into Starman educating Scott about his powers and all that. And there were some series that kind of did address that. The Alien teenagers. A lot of series like that in the '90s. The Alien teenagers. I think Starman kind of was sort of pioneering that storyline before it happened.
Well, thank you, Chris, so much. Did you enjoy yourself?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We hope
My
to
pleasure.
see you back there.
Thank you all. Thank you for being so generous. Really appreciate it.